Dungeons and Dragons has so many different aspects to the gameplay, and honestly, it can really leave you kind of lost when you're trying to get into the game. I know it was a really big challenge for me, so today I'm going to help you kind of get through the misconceptions, the books, the advice, and all of these other things that can make you feel like you're drowning, especially as you're starting playing the game, because it can be really challenging to kind of get started into it. So in this video, I kind of want to run you through how to actually get started into Dungeons and Dragons. And then second, I really want to kind of give you this like level up guide in a way where you can kind of expand yourself as you continue playing the game and continuously kind of grow as your character grows and as you grow as a person and kind of learn how to get better at the game. That being said, there is one skill that is vastly important for role play, and it really can't be overlooked when you're starting into Dungeons and Dragons because it, for a lot of people, is the barrier to entry. And that kind of skill is improv. Improv is a big part of any role-playing game, and as you're getting into it, it can be really challenging, especially if you have no background in improv. And honestly, as someone that's starting out without any like experience into role play or into improv in general, I would actually recommend for new players before your first session, actually sit down and look up an episode of this show called Whose Line Is It Anyway? It's a really good comedy show where they kind of showcase different improv skills and give you a lot of really good ideas that can help you for growing into this kind of role of storytelling and playing this game with other people and being able to make things up on the fly. I think it's a really, really useful skill because it's the foundation of role play. So that's where actually I would recommend a lot of people start, not with any books, nothing else. Just look up some of these improv shows that have come out through the years and watch an episode, figure out kind of how these people are doing it, how they're coming up with things, what are prompting them, and that will get you vastly farther than spending hundreds of hours looking up different tips and tricks for Dungeons and Dragons. If you can just think on your feet, that is the most useful skill for the whole game and really is the foundation of the game itself. Now that we kind of broken down the number one skill for D&D, let's kind of get into more of the technical things that you'll need to be able to play the game. I think most people know this now, but you're going to need an actual copy of the Player's Handbook, which is a book that is readily available in a great number of places, and I'll kind of break down some places for you to look for that book. And then the second thing is just a set of dice. If you're kind of uneasy about sitting down and reading a whole book on how to play Dungeons and Dragons, a really great recommendation that I can make for you, and I like to do this with a lot of my newer players, is ask your dungeon master to sit down with you and help you make your character and kind of break down the different parts of the book so that it's not quite as overwhelming, because they're probably going to have a lot better understanding of how the book is actually run. That being said, as a new player, there's kind of two positions you can have, and this is where the balancing act kind of starts. If you're a player and you have a dungeon master, this is a really great way to get into the game. That being said, if you are a new DM starting out, really the best resource for you is the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master Guide. And I would recommend reading both of those before you really get into the slog of it and trying to figure it out on your own. And because of that, I would say before you start reading those books, maybe watch some videos produced by Critical Role or by Dimension 20, these big YouTubers who literally run this for a job. And then after you've watched kind of their campaigns and get a feel for how they story tell, after that, maybe look at smaller channels like myself and Not Another D&D podcast, which is also run by Dimension 20. But there's some of the older things to kind of see how people have grown into these roles, get some advice from other DMs, because a lot of these people go on podcasts really often and they'll actually do Q&As and they'll kind of talk about their process. And that can be a lot of help. I mean, here on this channel, we run a podcast called DMI, which is Dungeon Master Inspiration. And our whole goal is to give resources for new DMs to kind of grow and experienced players to hear stories from other people and kind of learn and grow together as a whole. And I think that those skills are really important, and that advice is sometimes really useful for people who are lost on where to start. That being said, reading the book as a new Dungeon Master can be overwhelming, so the advice that I would give you is just take your time. Another really great place for resources on Dungeons & Dragons, whether you're a player or a DM, is actually D&D Beyond. D&D Beyond is produced by Wizards of the Coast, the creators of the game, and it's a really great tool because it has breakdowns of how to build characters. And this can be a resource that you point your new players towards if you're the Dungeon Master, Or it can be a resource for you as a player to kind of scroll through and see what might be fun. There's descriptions of every class, and you can decide what you want to do. That being said, some of these character creation templates that they have are a little limited because they only have the really basic classes. You actually have to buy the books or pay for a subscription in order to gain access to all of them. That being said, as a new player, a really great way to start is just pick a class that sounds like fun and start with that and just grab one of the basic subclasses. I will say there's a lot more in Dungeons and Dragons, and there's tons and tons of subclasses, but don't overwhelm yourself. Make it easy. This is a game. It's supposed to be fun. It's things that we do with our friends, and honestly, it's a great adventure to start on. And I don't think as a new player, you're really going to miss out on that much by making your first character be one of those basic subclasses. It's really going to make your life easier and not make you feel as overwhelmed. That being said, if there's something really specific that you want to do, I would sit down with the dungeon master and kind of ask them for advice on what they think might be fun. And if you are the dungeon master, maybe some of these subclasses don't necessarily understand. Try to find an experienced player to kind of talk you through some of the things they've done that are fun and give you ideas and kind of assist you. There's no harm in asking your players for help as you're crafting a story. I mean, I still do it even to this day because I want to make sure that my players are getting what they want out of the game. So the first thing in the level up guide, I would say, is make sure you get yourself a copy of the core 3 books. And there's a couple of ways to do this. You go to your local game store and they kind of sell bundles of like the core books for D&D, and that's a really great way. I mean, it's how I started out getting the books and starting to collect them if you like having physical books, which I'm someone that really does enjoy. Or if you're more of an online person, you can actually buy them on D&D Beyond, and I know they're quite a bit cheaper. There's even a subscription for D&D Beyond that gives you access to a lot of this content, and I think that those things kind of are really kind of the place you want to grow. Yes, it's going to require you to invest a little bit more money, but at this point, you're kind of dedicated in the game, and it's a lot easier to just reference it when you have it than actually having to go through and try to find somebody else who has it every single time. And it's nice to just have it on hand. So if you're building a story or if you're building a character, you can just reference it whenever you want. Now that that's kind of out of the way, let's kind of talk about where you can find these things. As a new player, I started in high school knowing nothing. Nobody in my friend group played the game. I had no experienced players. So what did I do? I actually sat down and I went and I looked for the books. And there's quite a few places you can get them. They're sold at major supermarkets, so like your Walmarts, your Targets, and other places like that. And that is a place where you can kind of resort to along with Amazon if you're really struggling to find the books in your area. That being said, starting out as a new player, this can be kind of intimidating. I know it was for me. Go into your local game store. They can be a little tricky to find, but if you look up game stores or hobby stores near me, you will actually sometimes find them. You kind of have to dig through some subscriptions and other stores that are kind of similar, like Hobby Lobby and whatever. That's not what you're looking for. You're looking for hobby and game stores, and not only are they going to have the supplies you need, the dice, the books, the owners of the stores are usually pretty friendly in my experience, as well as they usually have a community together, and those communities can be really great. It's a great place where you can go in and be like, hey, I'm brand new. I've never touched Dungeons and Dragons before, and I really want to get into it. Can you give me some advice? And a lot of these people are more than happy to help people get into the hobby, and it's a great way to kind of get started in the game, and they're going to have everything you need. A lot of the more niche things like minis as you decide to go down those routes or not. Now that we've kind of gotten all of the physical things you need and talked about the most important skill in D&D, let's really get into the sometimes most tricky part of the game. And that's finding a group or managing a group. D&D groups have this big problem where they oftentimes fall apart due to scheduling, or you can't find friends who are interested, or 100 different things. There's a couple of ways you can run D&D games. The first is an online game, and the second is an in-person one. If you have no friends who play the game and you want to get in, the best way to find an in-person group is through those local game stores. Sometimes people will actually come in and host games in those stores, and that can be a great way to try and find somebody to get involved. And a way you can simply do that is going into your local game store and being like, hey, I'm really looking to get into this game. I don't know anyone who plays, and my friends aren't really interested. And sometimes the store owners will have people that they know who are looking for players, and they can kind of make that introduction for you or people that are working at the store. And that can be a really great way to start to make new friendships and get into the game and get to know people who are more experienced than you. And the second way is with online campaigns. Getting into online campaigns can actually be a lot easier. There's plenty of websites now where people actually host D&D games and you can actually pay to be a part of those games. Random people, random DM, and it can feel really nice to kind of not have that pressure. There's always going to be the campaign going. It's always going to kind of run, and you're going to have a lot less of those scheduling things because people are really signing up to be there. That being said, if you're having issues with scheduling with your own friends and you're playing with your friends, a great way to do it is one, making sure your story is very, very compelling. And that's where people like me make podcasts on talking about how to make stories more compelling. And the second option is doing it on days when you know your group is free. And sometimes people are going to float in and out of the group. That's okay. You don't have to have everyone there for every single session. I would say just try to have everyone there. And if it's consistently not working for a couple of weeks, start planning to kind of talk to people about, hey, maybe your character goes off and does something else in the city or this or that, where you can bring them back in and out on a more fluid basis, and trying to schedule around that can be a lot easier. That being said, that's more on the Dungeon Master. So if you're a player, I really would say the best ways to do it is either joining a pre-made group, whether that's through a local card store or through your friend group, or grabbing an online group. And if you found this helpful, please check out the rest of my channel. I try to give lots of good advice and do informational videos on Dungeons and Dragons to kind of help people who are newer to the game. That being said, I will be putting out a video on how to make great characters, how to come up with ideas and brainstorm, and I think that that one is going to be a lot of fun, so stay tuned if you're interested in seeing that. And other than that, I hope you have an inspiring rest of your day.